Hello, class, and welcome to our review of Love as the Practice of Freedom by Bell Hooks. Um, First, before we go over the document, because I think it's a wonderful source that any of you could incorporate into your essay number 2 on stereotyping and identity. Um, Specifically, I wanted to briefly look at an abstract from a document in Australian Social Work, the journal. So we know that it's got an ethos, a respectable authority, and essentially, right, the author is taking Hooks's work, right? Um, Love is marginalized in professional social work codes of ethics in Australia and internationally, yet reflecting on the emancipatory imperative of social work. Feminist bell hooks promotes love as a political process to transform systems of injustice such as capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. To transform systems of injustice like stereotypes, right? Systems of injustice that are perpetuated, right, because of stereotypes. Right? Analyzing the works of Hooks and other relevant literature, this article discusses the love ethic, a model of relationship-oriented activism encompassing dialogue, nonviolence, interconnectedness between people and between people and nature, reflexivity, shared power, and solidarity. It provides some practical suggestions for love-based social work practice, such as self-forgiveness, pursuing gender equal relationships, upholding fair workplace conditions, honoring Indigenous peoples, supporting oppressed people to assert their rights, connecting local and global action, nurturing symbiotic relationships with nature, and supporting empowering spirituality. All aspects examined in this document with regard to social work, but I think a lot of these ideas that this document is presenting are also true when we think about racism and stereotyping and the injustices that are perpetuated. This notion that we can use the love ethic, right, to educate and change these oppressive systems, these illogical systems. So, again, I think it could work as a source for any of the possible topics for writing about identity and stereotyping. The document, right, you have the website which it appears on, author title, if you need to cite it in your essay, cite it as a document from a website. Notice it comes from a .org as well. There's background on bell hooks if you got a chance to read that, and they kind of give a summary, if you would, of love as the practice of freedom. In order to decolonize our mind, suggest Hooks, we must begin to surrender participation in whatever sphere of coercive hierarchical domination we enjoy individual and group privilege. In the essay that follows from that book, Hooks proposes an ethic of love as the means by which we might be guided to turn away from an ethic of domination. And I think that ethic of domination is what's perpetuating identity stereotypes. In this society, there is no powerful discourse on love emerging either from politically progressive radicals or from the left. The absence of sustained focus on love in progressive circles arises from a collective failure to acknowledge the needs of the spirit and an overdetermined emphasis on material concerns. Without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. And again, it's that oppression and that exploitation that leads, right, to racism, to stereotypes, to discrimination, to double standards. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from an ethic of domination. A culture of conversion. Again, going back to the idea that we need to educate ourselves as people, as human beings, to avoid the damaging repercussions of stereotyping to avoid identity issues related to profiling and racism and discrimination. And I think that her ethic of love is a really, really poignant idea that speaks to liberating ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation. Notice how each of her paragraphs has an extremely well developed, coherent sense. She has topic sentences, she has details, she incorporates quotes, she comments on the significance of the quotes, she relates the quotes back to her notion of the ethic of love and how we can use that to overcome oppression and domination. Without an ethic of love shaping the direction of our political vision and our radical aspirations, we are often seduced in one way or the other into continued allegiance to systems of domination, imperialism, sexism, racism, classism. And these are all perpetuated through stereotyping. It has always puzzled me that women and men who spend a lifetime working to resist and oppose one form of domination can be systematically supporting another. And she's very specific with examples of sexism and how it relates to our culture, right? How it relates to oppression and exploitation, right? Notice the last sentence of the paragraph. Until we are all able to accept the interlocking, interdependent nature of systems of domination and recognize specific ways each system is maintained, we will continue to act in ways that undermine our individual quest for freedom and collective liberation struggle. And again, I think at the root of this, right, is stereotypes and stereotyping related to identity. And that's leading to the domination notion of exploitation and oppression. We have to expand our concern about politics of domination and our capacity to care about the oppression and exploitation of others. Now, again, she's going beyond the traditional definition of love when we think of it, as kind of a feeling, if you would. And it's a tool for social progress, is what she's saying. She's replacing these already established ideas about love as a feeling, if you would, that's surrounding us in mass media every day. And it's important that we think of this notion of the ethic of love as a very necessary, right, and important tool for social progress. The ability to acknowledge our blind spots, right, our stereotypes in some ways, can emerge only as we expand our concern about politics of domination and our capacity to care. We have to care about the oppression and exploitation of others. At no point in our culture is this just as important as now. And for those of you writing about Black Lives Matter and stereotyping and racism, I feel as though this essay is a wonderful source when you're thinking of and reflecting about how we can avoid those oppressive systems and what possible recommendations you may have for overcoming identity stereotypes and stereotyping. And I think this ethic of love really speaks to our culture and the situations that we're in right now as a society, as a race of people, human beings. And she says a love ethic makes this expansion possible, this idea to care about the oppression and exploitation of others. She brings in Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you'll notice right on our homepage, I have links to quotes by Dr. King and my personal favorite quote by Dr. King, right? And she analyzes, right, this notion that he had a prophetic insight to recognize that a revolution built on any other foundation would fail, right? It's rooted, civil rights movement was rooted in a love ethic. And then she, notice her topic sentences, she moves on to the 60s Black Power movement, right? Using Rogerian strategy. You'll notice in the conclusion, I'll point out, she actually uses the word empathy. Notice how she's looking at masculinist, sexist biases in leadership led to the suppression of the love ethic. That is very true today as well. It's very important to note how relevant this document is. Um, she references Malcolm X, right? And again, even though King talked about the importance of Black self-love, he talked more about loving our enemies. So she's referencing the ethos of her sources and specifically outlining how this ethic of love is at the root of our ability to understand the oppression and exploitation and hopefully, right, stop the perpetuation of these biased systems, right? Political decolonization that would provide a blueprint for the eradication of Black self-hatred, right? Black folks entering the realm of racially integrated American life because of the success of civil rights and Black power movement suddenly found we were grappling with an intensification of internalized racism. Again, what's going on with the police brutality, what has been going on with police brutality. I really think that this is just such a relevant essay and document, specifically too in 2020. So she kind of goes on, right, to continue bringing in her sources. A culture of domination is anti-love. Notice again how her topic sentences clearly present the main idea of the paragraph. And then she has her quotes. She examines the quotes. She comments and relates them, right? Others search for definitions for ways to sustain a love ethic in a culture that negates human value and valorizes materialism. Still prevalent today. And that's exactly what perpetuates these stereotypes with regard to identity, because people are negating human value and valorizing other things like materialism and capitalism. So as she kind of continues, right, to bring in her sources, let's kind of skip ahead here to the conclusion, right? She brings in her own personal anecdote, her own experiences, and I encourage you to bring in anecdotes and to invoke your ethos as well, right? I like how, as she's working towards the conclusion, right? Choosing love, we also choose to live in a community, and that means that we do not have to change by ourselves, right? We can count on critical affirmation and dialogue with comrades walking a similar path. Again, she's reflecting on how this ethic of love can help improve our society and our culture, just as though you will be reflecting in essay 2 about how we can stop the perpetuation of these identity stereotyping and stereotypes to improve our culture, to improve our society. She continues then to bring in the idea of service. A love ethic emphasizes the importance of service to others, that we have this responsibility, right? And again, as she kind of brings it all together in the conclusion, notice how her last paragraph repeats her point, reviews her support, and reflects on the bigger picture, right? I'll kind of skip down here after she brings in King's quote, "The end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, the end is the creation of the beloved community." The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom. And I really like how that last sentence goes back to the title, references the title. Remember, your title should clue the reader into the purpose of your essay, and what better way to do so than to reference that title in your conclusion as part of a sentence, if possible. So I hope you found this review helpful, and as I've said, I think everyone could use this as a secondary source for essay 2, because I think that this love ethic specifically relates to identity stereotypes and stereotyping as an educational tool for us to transcend such biased and damaging behaviors to better improve our culture and society. So Thanks for watching and listening. And as always, let me know if you have any questions.